Can you give me your definition of forgiveness?
To let something pass.
To make it okay.
There's something done. There's someone done
When
wrong.
someone hurts you, it just hurts. It's hard to let go of that.
Everything is forgivable.
Violence and misunderstanding and miscommunication, and those are ultimately a lot more detrimental.
I think the ability to
than
forgive is a strength, and I think it's a
forgiveness is.
necessary strength to be able to move on if something happened to you or someone you love.
Without forgiving, we would never be able to see the bigger picture of life.
I think if somebody's done something wrong to you, you actually don't do the same to others, and you just move on.
Everyone has different meaning of forgiveness, so for some people some things are unforgivable, and to others it is forgivable.
Like somebody did something to my little sister or something, I couldn't forgive them.
It's easy to forgive someone, but it's hard to forget.
I don't think forgiveness can be defined.
Forgiveness is less an idea, or less perhaps a definition, and more of an attitude, or a mindset, or a way of living.
Oh, well, what is forgiveness? I mean, is it just forgetting about the whole thing?
I don't know. I don't know. Next question, please. Being nice to others. It sort of means sorry, but I want to give it and get it. So say if somebody hit me and they said sorry and I said that's okay, that's what forgiveness means.
That's a difficult question.
Forgiveness. Very complex word for me.
I think forgiveness in its purest form is rare, is very rare. We're not built to completely forget something.
Forgiveness is choosing to live with the consequences of someone else's actions.
You attempt to repair past damage done to a relationship.
It's to say that I don't expect you to be punished for what you did. I accept that you've done wrong and that you mean not to do it again, and I forgive you.
But with that, I think, comes all kinds of levels and all kinds of decisions or all kinds of thought patterns depending on what the hurt is.
If I know that this person will do it again, I don't want to forgive him because I don't want him in my life again.
It is a selfish act. You do it for yourself. It is a good selfish act. It's a healthy selfish act. Because when I think about Tony, my blood pressure doesn't go up. I don't get angry. He has a very safe passage through my mind.
When you forgive somebody, you become higher than the person that asks for forgiveness.
I'm not generally comfortable with the term forgiveness because it feels hierarchical to me. If I hurt someone and say I'm sorry, and if they say, well, I forgive you, I'm usually like, oh, fuck you anyway, because it feels like they're standing above me. And it's the same when somebody else says to me, I'm sorry. I don't say I forgive you. What I say is, if it's really okay, then I say, well, it's okay. And if it's something that's not okay, then I say, well, thank you for saying that, and we still need to work through some stuff.
You're giving the control of your life to another person when you're saying that you need to apologize to me and then only I can forgive. And what if they don't? Then you're still left in a very vulnerable situation.
I don't know if you need a verbal apology, but I think the person who has been hurt needs to feel, and I know that's a terrible way to describe it, but needs to feel that that other person is truly sorry.
If someone is not forgiving you and you're genuinely sorry about what you did and you've made that clear, then obviously that's going to turn to anger. Like, why? Please forgive me. I want to move on, you know? And you're not allowing me to do that. That's not fair.
When someone holds on to a grudge, even after you've come around, you get pissed. And you feel like, hey, what's this? But you have to tolerate people's process. They might not be ready. Even if you're ready to apologize, they might not be ready to forgive. They might still be working through whatever pain they're working through.
Well, it's hard to forgive because sometimes if you go up to them, they might do the same thing they did as the last time. There's a lot of people out there that they do one thing, they say sorry, but then they do it again.
There's some things that just you can't forgive. You know, can you forgive a rapist that's raped you? There's just some things that can't and almost shouldn't be forgiven no matter, you know, what happens.
People will say, you know, gosh, Derek, don't you have any compassion for don't you have compassion for rapists? Don't you have compassion for CEOs who are killing the planet? Don't you have compassion for, you know, we have to have compassion for them because they're suffering. And we have to realize that the perpetrators are victims too, because they must be feeling a lot of pain or they wouldn't be doing this. Once they're no longer a perpetrator, we can talk about me having compassion for them. But perpetrator as perpetrator, I have zero compassion. All of my compassion, all of my loyalty is to their victims.
10 girls shot at school in Amish country. Half survived, half did not.
An unimaginable crime followed by an inconceivable response.
Even though there's been this terrible thing happen, we don't need to think about judgment, we need to think about forgiveness and going on.
Can you speak a little bit more to the Amish belief of forgiveness? I mean, I think that it's something that those of us on the outside, when we hear it so immediately from these people after such a tragedy, it's hard to believe that they could so instantaneously say this and be so willing to forgive.
I mean, you need to mourn before you can forgive something like that. That's to me strikes of a kind of crippling do-gooderism. To forgive something so painful, so big, so fast, is to not give yourself a chance to really live through what you have to live through. And I think people from certain religious traditions, it's hard because they're not supposed to be rageful and they're supposed to be always loving. And if that's the case, it really kind of gets in the way of really going through the process that makes forgiveness, you know, integral and organic and real.
In my own case, when I write about that, I say that there is no atoning for what you've done here. If you've taken a life particularly, that marks you for the rest of your life as a person who has killed somebody, and it's so serious that if there is going to be any atonement, it's not here, it's when you die, and whatever you meet in terms of any afterlife, that's when the matter is settled by way of forgiveness, if there is such a thing.
I'm still deciding whether I do believe in a higher being or a God or whatnot. I don't think that influences how I feel about people who have done something to me or if I've done something to somebody else. I'm still yet to decide that, but I do know what it means to forgive somebody and when I should or shouldn't.
It's hard to be great. It's hard to go beyond. It's hard to transcend our own personal limitations. It's really, really hard, you know? That's why community exists, though. That's one of the reasons why community exists. So I think when the Amish say, we have to forgive now, it's kind of like a rule. And it might seem kind of stupid or trite or unnatural, but I think a lot of those community rules seem that way from a distance, but I think they have a practical purpose. I mean, what's the alternative?
If we're really going to define the word, if we're going to talk about this as being something, it shouldn't be that easy to just kind of wipe that out and say, it's okay. You know, God's forgiving me. God's forgiving what you did. It's wrong. You shouldn't have done it. Don't do it again. But don't worry about it anymore because you're fine. It just seems too easy to be able to just say, you know, God said it's okay.
But I think this is maybe why the Amish make that rule. Because you can't really do that as a single human being by yourself. You cannot possibly summon that strength. Neither could I. But I think if we have a rule to live by, if we have a community that lives by this rule, that tells us this is how we have to be in order to move on, then there's something kind of amazing about that. I mean, it's something very powerful to me about that.
Do I believe there are any unforgivable acts? Well, I don't know. I think it's the person who has gone through the experience can only tell that whether they can or they should forgive or not.
If I think of Leia, my daughter, And if somebody harms her, I don't know. I don't know, depending on what it is. Again, broken heart from a boyfriend, that's part of life. That's probably something that I can forgive the guy for. Physical harm, kidnapping, I don't know. I hope I never have to find out.
It's a tough question. I think last time I answered pretty quickly, no. And I think I gave the example of rape. Can you forgive rapists? And I started thinking later, forgiveness isn't so much for the other person, it's for you, so you can get past it yourself, so you can heal and you can, move on from the event. But no, I still don't think so. If you can't empathize with the person or relate to them, or what they've done is just so horrendous that you can never see yourself ever wanting to do anything good for that person, I think then that'd be a major barrier to forgiveness.
I was in therapy for quite a while. And when I first started therapy, they say you're supposed to do visualizations. And I did this visualization where I would try to go and comfort myself as a child after the sexual abuse. And I would, try to give the kid an ice cream cone or something. And the young me would just stare at the adult me with contempt and disgust. And I couldn't figure out why for a while until the kid said, look, I don't want an ice cream cone. I want for the rapes to stop.
We've done work on abuse children, and we saw that children can easily forgive their parents for the abuse that they receive, especially if they see that, the punishment they receive is not intentional, or the intention is to make them grow up as good persons, then that's forgivable. But if the intention is clearly to harm and hurt and not to teach, then that's unforgivable.
My father's extremely violent. My brother has epilepsy from blows to the head. He broke my sister's arm. He raped my mother, my sister, and me. And when I was a child, so often, so many people would say, well, you need to forgive him. He is, to my understanding, still denying that he ever did any of this, and he's still denying that he is abusive. And so, as such, there can be no forgiveness, because to forgive him would be a horrible insult to my mother, to my sisters, to my brother, to me. If he came to me now to ask for forgiveness, I would say, come to me again in 10 years and show me how you changed, and show me what you've done to make up for it. In the meantime, I don't want to hear from you.
I don't consider forgiveness the sine qua non of goodness, but I do think it is a marker of maturity and development. But it's only a marker in the sense that it says something about how far you've come. None of us are all the way. None of us die as finished. There's always unfinished parts of ourselves, and I think there's always going to be things that we can't forgive, and who could expect it to be otherwise?
On the other hand, there's my mom. I had a tremendous amount of resentment toward her through my 20s, and we had, in my late 20s and early 30s, we had a series of conversations, and she says, I think about this all the time, and I regret the decisions that I made and did not make. And she said, when you were in your 20s and were saying that you're a writer, but you weren't doing much of anything, you're sitting around a lot, doing not much of anything, did you ever wonder why I didn't hassle you to get a job? Do you ever wonder why I supported you emotionally and sometimes financially when you weren't doing anything? And she said that the reason is that she knew that I had never had a childhood, and that if I was ever going to be happy as an adult, I needed a long time to vomit up the effects of my coercive upbringing and to learn who I am and what I wanted. And really, in that moment, truly, every bit of my resentment toward my mother faded away, because if someone does something that harms you, what can you ask more of them than that they, A, admit that they made a mistake and that they regret what happened, and B, that they have done everything in their power in the meantime to make it up to you. The truth is, I actually don't think about my father very much. He doesn't control my life as he once did. And it's not because I forgave him. My recovery, in great measure, came through writing a language older than words, and a book in which I made meaning of that suffering. And I turned my suffering into a gift for the community, which is what many trauma survivors do.
For me, I'm na stage of, ano pa lang, trying to forgive. And I know I can forgive. I'm a Muslim, and I'm very proud to be a Muslim. The military man chopped my tito in front of me. Then I just jumped to the river and I don't know what happened. And I just woke up. Then and the Muslim people, then they said, okay, who are you? Then trying to asking me. And then that's the time that I've been away to my parents for 6 months. And even my mom and dad don't know if I'm still alive. And I don't know where is my family. I want to kill the military man who killed my tito. They want to occupy my land, the Mindanao. And we Muslim really believe that Mindanao is belong to us.
I speak to the elders in Mindanao, and they distinctly remember a time when Muslims and Christians were such good friends. Because we always hear about Muslims killing Christians, but there were also a lot of vigilante Christian groups who didn't want to have anything to do with Muslims and really ran them down, stole their land.
At the age of, I think, 16 years old, I formed my group. We harass a lot of people, like Christian people, mostly Christian people, because I really believe before that all Christian is my enemy. Every time I go to school in high school, I don't have any friend because this is a Catholic school. It's not for Muslim. The Christian told me, they told me, because the way I'm wearing the hijab is, my hair is kulot. Then I have a lot of lies in my head because I'm wearing my hijab. And I said, okay, just see what Mary, the statue of Mary, is wearing a hijab. They reject me because I'm wearing a velo. And they said, we're going to accept you if you remove your velo. And I said, no, because I'm a Muslim. I'm very proud to be a Muslim. And I want to be alone because the Christian people, I hate Christian. As I just dare to learn, and my ambition is to have a power to kill the military man who killed my tito. And I want to advance against them. But when I graduated as high school, I realized that I questioned myself because I have this classmate, a Christian, is very, very kind to me. And I said, he's a Christian, so why this guy is very kind to me and I'm a Muslim? I want to know why the Christian killed the Muslim and Muslim killed the Christian, and why we keep on fighting each other. One day that I go to library and I say this one devil and the Old Testament, the Bible. Then I get the book, I bring it to the counter and I'm trying to borrow it. Then the librarian said, no, you can't bring that. And I put it back. And I back again to my seat and I'm, okay, what book is that? Then I get the book, and the time we go out, then I steal the book and say that. Then I bring it at home. Then when I read it, I put it on my table. Then my father said, oh yan, magiging Kristiyano ka na. You're converted because you're reading a Bible. I said, no, pa, I'm just comparing it to the Quran because I don't understand what they believe. I try to compare everything. And for the first time, I cried because a lot of Christians suffer because of me. A lot of Christian people cried is because of what I'm doing before. And I found out that the Christian people, if the Christian follow what written in that book, they're Muslims. When you analyze it, it's just going to love. It's love. The Quran teaches us the Muslim how to love, and the Bible also teaches the Christian how to love also. So there's no reason why Muslim and Christian fighting each other.
When we started this Bishops Ulama Forum in 1996, the atmosphere was very tense because this was the first time. And we were asked, the bishops were asked, what comes to your mind when you hear the word Muslim? And the ulama were asked, what comes to your mind when you hear the word Christians? So on one side, they are traitors, they are this, they are that. On the other side, they are terrorists, things like that. No. That broke down somehow the barrier. We started talking. Over the years, in order to bring about peace and to diminish this strong prejudice of one against the other, is to refrain from using the word Muslim. When somebody commits a crime, do not say a Muslim committed a crime. In the same way, the Muslims are also asked not to use the word Christian. Juan de la Cruz allegedly killed this person, but do not use the same Christian. So this is one of, we might say, the fruits of this ulama-Christian dialogue, where people, Muslims and Christians, learn to know each other and to know about each other's faith, their concept of God, their concept, everything. So this is a very good program to bring about reconciliation and peace among Muslims and Christians.
In the Philippines, we're so divided by so many things. We have different political inclinations, we have so many dialects, we have so many beliefs, and each of these things just really divide us so much. Once we can start to say that we're friends, and it doesn't matter whether I wear a veil or not, but real, genuine friendship, then for me, that's the start of it. And once we begin to really forgive each other, forgive each other's parents for what they've done, then it's all there.
But does forgiveness correct things? Does it make it better? Does it alter it in a way that it's good for everybody?
I've had several encounters with different white people asking me to forgive them for what their people done to us during the 1800s and 1900s with the smallpox epidemic as well as the residential school.
Mr. Speaker, I stand before you today to offer an apology to former students of Indian residential schools. Two primary objectives of the residential school system were to remove and isolate children from the influence of their home, families, traditions, and cultures, and to assimilate them into the dominant culture. These objectives were based on the assumption that Aboriginal cultures and spiritual beliefs were inferior and unequal. Indeed, some sought, as was infamously said, to kill the Indian in the child. Today, we recognize that this policy of assimilation was wrong, has caused great harm, and has no place in our country.
I didn't even know my dad was in there. I didn't know his brothers were in there. I didn't know his sisters were in there. And it just blew me away. I couldn't believe it. They never told me all my life.
The Government of Canada built an educational system in which very young children were often forcibly removed from their homes, often taken far from their communities.
I couldn't understand it. I had bitterness towards my dad and my grandfather, but it wasn't their fault. Provincial police came to the village, to our people. They just took all the children and took them to residential schools. And a lot of our people were like that. And then they outlawed our politics, which was a very large part of our tribal laws.
I never did know my language. I never knew we had a culture. I didn't know we had dances and songs and traditional masks. I didn't know we had regalia until I was 20. All my life, since I was a boy, I never knew that we had those. Until 1980, reinstated the potlatch system in Bella Coola after 50 years of it being banned.
First Nations, Inuit, and Métis languages and cultural practices were prohibited.
The ones that went in there only spoke our language, and when they came out, they didn't know nothing about our language or our culture. They tortured our children, they beat them, they raped them, they murdered them, and they did a lot of things to our people.
Well, some former students have spoken positively about their experiences at residential schools. These stories are far overshadowed by tragic accounts of the emotional, physical, and sexual abuse and neglect of helpless children and their separation from powerless families and communities.
It just diminished a lot of things within our people. I think it's been passed down from grandmother to mother to son and daughter to grandchildren. You know, it's a continuing thing because children and grandchildren learn from their mothers and dads and their grandfathers and grandmothers, and sometimes it does surface.
It's hard for me. It's kind of a flashback with me. And I've traveled with a lot of other chiefs, and some of them just break down flashbacks. When I came out of school, all I did was drinking and in and out of jail, and I was very suicidal. One of our boys, my son's Urban, he died from alcohol, drinking too much alcohol, and I had another son that I didn't properly take care of him. My wife, I didn't treat her very well because I was in residential school. I didn't treat them right. My children, I was a drunkard, out in and out of jail. And forgiveness, it's very difficult for me to let it go.
We now recognize that in separating children from their families, we undermine the ability of many to adequately parent their own children and sow the seeds for generations to follow. Not only did you suffer these abuses as children, but as you became parents, you were powerless to protect your own children from suffering the same experience. And for this, we are sorry. The Government of Canada sincerely apologizes and asks the forgiveness of the Aboriginal peoples of this country for failing them so profoundly.
The education system failed in educating the general public about who we are, what's happening to us, what happened to us, and why are Indians living in reservations, and why Indians seem to be getting handouts and being wards of the state. And it's because there's a process in place, and that's assimilation and extinguishment. And people aren't educated to that, so they see the stereotypical view of Indian people, and they've been lazy, drunks, always looking for handouts, don't want to work. But if the general public were educated and understood what's happened to our people and who we are, maybe they'll support who we are as a people. If you understand your spirit and the wonderfulness you share with other people, then you know how to forgive. But it takes a lot of understanding as well. Where there's no respect and lack of understanding, dig deep into understanding, dig deep in for respect.
We really have to let go of the past and have forgiveness come forward. And that's the only way we can move forward, is to let the past go and let go all the hurts and the pains that what happened to our people, because we're still here.
We're still standing up for what we believe in. And jails can't imprison it. A bullet can't kill it. And we're still alive today. And we're still a loving and caring people.
Forgiveness can't exist without some atrocity or some bad event. So, one, it's complex to understand because it's so personal to each person. There's so many different definitions, and it's uncomfortable to talk about because it's forever connected to some atrocity.
If someone killed my child, how could I forgive you for that?
I was born in Kenya and moved to the United States in 1974 with my family. What was ironic about that is my son Tariq was born actually in the US. I thought they would be safer. So he was my only son. I have a beautiful daughter, but he was my only son. Tariq had just moved in with his girlfriend Jennifer. They had plans to get married. In fact, they wanted to move to New York. Tariq was a great photographer and a great writer, and thought he might work for National Geographic one day. In 1995, Tariq was 20. He was a student at San Diego State University, and he worked as a part-time pizza delivery man. He was an art student, sophomore art student. On a cold January night, he was lured by a youth gang to a bogus address, and he knocked on several doors and came back to his car, put the pizzas in the trunk, and he was accosted by a group of 4 youth gang members. 3 of them were 14-year-old. The leader of the gang was an 18-year-old who gave a 9mm gun to a 14-year-old, and he fired 1 round, which actually entered my son's body right here under the left armpit. It traveled across the upper part of his chest, and it came out of the right armpit. And my son died drowning in his own blood. After Tariq died, it literally took all of my willpower just to climb out of bed. I don't know what can be more complex than losing a child. I always used to say that parents were not engineered to withstand the loss of a child. I mean, you would do anything for your child. You'd give both your eyes, your arms. And if I had been there, I'd have put my body between him and the bullet. You do this instinctively. So in the days after Tariq died, I remember it was hard to eat or sleep. Your biological functions change. You walk around like a zombie. I was suicidal at one point. What saved me was a strong spiritual foundation. I did not have the anger and the feelings of revenge, because I saw that there were victims at both ends of the gun. And I felt, as an American, I'm a naturalized American. I felt, as an American, I must take my share of the responsibility for the bullet that took my son's life. And quite frankly, so should every caring American. I reached out in forgiveness to the grandfather and guardian of my son's killer. His name is Ples Felix. I remember that first meeting when I was introduced by the district attorney. And I told Ples that I don't come to you in anger or revenge or resentment. I come to you in compassion and forgiveness, because what I really see here is we both lost a child. My son died, and your grandson, which was really more like a son to him because he was his guardian and Tony calls him daddy, you lost your son to the adult prison system. So he was very quick to take my hand of forgiveness. It took thousands and thousands of hours of meditation before I was able to meet Tony. He was well-mannered, soft-spoken, remorseful, very articulate, charismatic young man. I connected with his humanity, And I could see that my hand of forgiveness had shifted this young man. I told him, Tony, when you come out, you have a job at the foundation. I started the Tariq Kanisa Foundation, which is named after him, to help me deal with the loss in a positive manner. The vision of the Tariq Kanisa Foundation is a world free of youth violence. And the mission statement of the foundation is to break the cycle of youth violence by A, saving lives, B, empowering kids, and C, teaching peace. The work that I do today is very different than the work I was doing before when my son was alive. So this experience that I went through changed my life.
It's hard to know what goes on in anyone's heart. You know, how is he able to do what he's doing with this incredible situation of his son having been murdered? Who could ever explain that? It borders on a miracle. But I don't see much of the life-transforming forgiveness. I think that's mostly what gets focused on. But I don't think in the average life we have life-transformative forgiveness. Most people don't have a need for it. What's much more transformative is the everyday forgiveness and the gradual growth of the capacity for everyday forgiveness.
Forgiveness to me right now is the sort of feeling a deep need to be at peace with these people whose lives you've impacted and who've impacted on your life. And a need for actual peace, not just, oh, are we cool now?
It's the people we care about the most who hurt us the most and who we are most readily able to feel betrayed by. And a lot of that goes back to early childhood.
With my mother, it was just a question of, I wanted her to understand how important art was. That art wasn't just this hobby.
But when someone's dead, you're really on your own in terms of forgiveness. But it's amazing how even relationships with dead people change. You can have a new relationship with a parent, even after that parent dies.
Well, to me, the sort of interesting aspect of this issue, forgiveness, especially in relation to our play, is that in order to feel that you need forgiveness, you have to feel guilty about something.
In the plane from Berlin to LA, I prayed for her to wait long enough for me to see her again. Long enough for me to hear her again. Long enough for me to tell her I'm sorry.
The play is sort of like a letter in some way to, I think, all mothers, any mother that watches the play. It's not just to mine. The thing with my mother was about the understanding. I don't think she understood how important art was to me. I definitely do have tunnel vision when it comes to making art, and I have put that before almost everything in my life. And now I'm at a point where I'm not putting that first. And I'm thinking back 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Wow, I've always put that first. And because of putting art first, people in my life that are close to me, who I loved, have been hurt by that. So I think at the end of the play, it's me trying to bring her back and get this forgiveness and get this understanding on my terms, which is still the terms of an artist. But you know what? The thing about it is that through this very thing that has kind of made me cast aside everybody else and just focus on it, this first love, if you will, this really is making art. Through this very thing that made him kind of ignore love and not acknowledge love is how he's trying to give love. This is something I'm dealing with right now as we speak. I'm going back to Berlin in 2 weeks to live close to my daughter, and I have conversations I have to have with her that I can finally have with her, explaining why I lived 6,000 miles away from her for such a long time and was only able to visit her 4 times a year. I hope I hope she'll be able to, forgive me. It seems like she already has. And I think that it's also maybe this kind of forgiveness that I'm talking about with the people that I feel I I need forgiveness from, I do have to be with them. I do have to engage them in some way. It's not a transatlantic phone call. I am literally going to Berlin for only one reason, because my daughter's there. Because I am making, amends in some way with her. So for me, this forgiveness that I'm dealing with them is about me being close by. It is about me cooking dinner for them. It is about me just being there.
You can have warm feelings towards someone and not want to live with him. You could feel, I've taken enough of your shenanigans. I don't want to live that way anymore. I think a lot of people feel that way about people that they once lived with or once were married to or once were good friends with. There's a warm, caring feeling, even if you don't want to, have the kind of close association you once had.
I was going through this Christian Life program and he was the team leader.
I think in general, what I was looking for was someone who would make me a better person as well, not just someone who's just, sort of good on their own. I always believe in a couple being a team. And I think one of the things that we both like from one another is I think we appear to make each other a little bit better.
He was, he was there up front, with good communication skills, good leadership skills, carries his clothes well.
The courtship, if you include leading up to the marriage, it was probably about 5-6 years.
The courtship, it wasn't there because after the Christian Life program, he started speaking with me, and the following week, he announced to everybody that we were going out.
Happiest memories with her, it's difficult to look past having our daughter Leia now. I would say that ever since we had Leia, that's sort of the happiest memories I could remember.
If you equate laughter with happiness, the laughter was rarely there. But then, when Leia came, with a lot of encouragement from Michael, Leia came, and I was really happy. I was happy. When we went out on our first date, I told Michael, if we're not moving to California, we're not gonna work out.
Our time in California was going to be a trial run.
I wanted to really move there before getting married to him, just to have a taste of being with my family before settling down, But Michael, is saying like, hon, we can move there together. We can love your family together.
The tough part was we lived with her family.
The situation wasn't very ideal because we decided to live with my aunt, my 2 aunts, and my mom. I'm not sure if he thinks not so great about my family. He's sort of distant.
The relationship between her family and mine, maybe in her mind it was going to get better when I lived there. But if anything, maybe she saw, and maybe I can describe it as such, that maybe I was even pulling away even more.
My mom will say, tell Michael to, start talking, start socializing, sit with us in the couch, watch Filipino shows with us even for a little bit instead of just being in the room.
So I think there was hope that, that type of scenario would draw us closer together. But instead, I think on both ends, both on her family and with me, it was like oil and water.
One of the things that my family got turned off with Michael is that they think that he's self-righteous. But when I will tell Michael, he would say to me, well, I'm just like that.
A guy like myself, very independent, someone who's lived on their own for a long time, even before marriage, it was difficult to sort of be in a situation where you weren't in charge of the house, or you definitely had to live with new people.
It was tense because Michael will be working from home. I will be working, in the hospital. I would go home, and Michael wants, of course, a piece of me first, not in the sexual sense, but 100%, attention. But at the same time, our culture, our Filipino culture, I also have to have my time with my mom, my aunts.
I've always been told that I was a good listener, but I think in my marriage I was probably a very poor listener. Rena was not an extrovert. She wasn't someone who would necessarily share her feelings straight out. And it was probably my job to find a way to get her to talk to me and get her to enjoy listening to me rather than maybe, as she has said more than once, it almost sounded like a father talking to a child.
He's not a bad person. He would listen to me. He will be open to my suggestions or opinions, but it's just that at the end of the day, I always just ended up agreeing with him. You know, like if my favorite color is red, and his favorite color is blue, at the end of the conversation, my favorite color will be blue.
I would say that I almost was wearing a bulletproof vest when it came to my marriage. I think I took for granted, you know, our marriage. I think definitely I took what we had and our strengths in our marriage for granted.
The red flags for me were when I met this person at work, you know, very jolly, you know, seems like the type of person who wouldn't have a care in the world, but yet he's a nurse, very caring, nurturing to the patients, follows the rules yet can be funny on the side. I thought for the first time, oh my gosh, I am so married and I'm thinking of these thoughts. Like, you know, for me, like finding another man attractive is like unheard of. You know, but when I saw him, that's the first time I thought, why am I married?
That's probably what started the wedge. He started sharing these lack of intimacy or maybe complaints about me to another man. And it's a man whom in the beginning, she used to share with me a lot about someone who they found cute at the workplace and very popular in that sense. And I remember even getting into a couple of fights with her about probably early jealousy that was going on. You know, I recall even one time saying to her, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if you started falling for this guy. And then I think the tip of the iceberg was when she received a bouquet of flowers, and she actually thought it was for me because I think it was shortly after a fight.
There was one night wherein I left my phone carelessly. I received a text, and that's when he found out about it.
I was really blindsided. And I think there's a difference between expecting to get hurt and not even having any clue that a hurt would be coming and then being hit. You know, I've played my share of sports, and really the hardest hit to pick yourself up from is one that you get from behind.
It's one of those that if I can turn back the clock, I would love to have broken the news to Michael. But I would say nobody who had an affair would be very proud to share that kind of news.
When I first found out about the affair, I don't know how else to describe it, but really it brought me down to my knees physically. I was actually on my knees when I found out, and only people that have gone through this can not only relate, but I can understand what they go through in a physical state.
It leaves a very bitter taste in my mouth, what I did.
I almost believed that she was tricked. I almost believed that somehow, you know how guys are, sweet talking their way. So in the beginning, definitely, I blamed the guy a lot more. The anger towards her was probably the fact that none of this was verbalized to me. Again, looking back now, there was probably some signs I could have picked up on, but I would say I would have been helped a lot if she would have talked to me.
You always have to communicate, and that's where I've gone wrong with this, with my marriage with Michael.
It's sort of black and white when you look at sort of quote unquote whose fault it was when it comes to the breakdown of the marriage.
I'm taking 100% of it, but Michael's very stubborn. He wants half of it.
But I would say that leading up to the event, or the events that sort of led towards the breakdown of the marriage, I would say that on my part, probably the intimacy part was something that I, again, if I had to do over again, would improve upon.
In most relationships, it's really hard to tell where the wrongdoing is and who needs to forgive. Very often it's both people who need to forgive. There's often stuff on both sides. And certainly in the construction of a relationship, both people are responsible.
Michael did reach out to me. Like, he would forgive me, forget everything.
We even went through, couples therapy together to try and get past this and reconcile. But the whole time, she wouldn't allow herself or wouldn't communicate to me that she would be willing to leave this guy. And as a matter of fact, they're still together today.
We're going through the separation path. He asked me, when were you happy with me? And he got really sad because I can't think, like right away think like, you know.
As I found out more from Rena, from her end, and how she actually fell for this guy and actually preferred what he offered more than I did at that time, I wouldn't say that I blamed her more, but I probably blamed him less. So I didn't think of it anymore as him sort of stealing my wife away, which is definitely what I thought of in the beginning, which is where the anger came from. But more along the lines of, oh, okay, this guy is something different, very different from what I can offer up. And it's something that that she preferred.
Forgiving is about one's personal development, about not staying in a grudge state, about not living as a victim, about becoming whole again.
I don't like anybody feeling sorry for me. I don't like anybody thinking that that I'm not well. And as a matter of fact, at the time I wasn't. So I think, you know, playing the victim, I can definitely see people wanting to do that or enjoying it. But I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like that feeling. Plus, I think, again, you know, just thinking of Leia, I didn't want to have her think that her dad can be defeated by something that other people have overcome in the past. When Rena asked for forgiveness for the affair relationship that she had, I can say to this day, even if she denies it, that it sure felt like it's because she got caught.
Even if we're apologizing in the face of someone who says, well, you know, go fuck off, I don't want your apology, I think it's still an important thing to do. An apology is something that we do as much for our own sake as for someone else's.
I had some thoughts that I didn't even know I had, because I'm not a violent person. I'm not a person who ever had feelings of wanting to hurt someone. But definitely after experiencing the hurt that I did, those were some of the feelings that came to be.
The inner process may include a long period of anger, and a period of protest, and a period of bitterness even, and wanting to kill the person who you feel hurt by. But it's much better to go through those stages and to really work them through than to go straight to a forgiveness which is not real and which never gives you the opportunity to really get to the other end.
I think, you know, for someone to get to the point where they even want to forgive someone, it takes time.
Typically, husband and wife come apart, and if it's not going to be a simple, uncontested, no-fault kind of a thing, if it's not a happy separation, then the emotions are big, and the people come to the lawyers, to get the best you can, but also to get even.
One of the biggest decisions, of course, was that Rena wanted to move down to Los Angeles, because not only had we always planned to do that, but her family lives there, and the guy, Ken, lives there. So it was obvious that that's what she wanted to do. My first instinct, of course, was to let her go, but block the move of my daughter.
The worst thing about family law, and the reason I finally had to stop doing it, because I couldn't deal with it emotionally, was using little children as pawns to get at the other spouse. And that kind of thing does happen. And can you forgive that? Well, that's perhaps the worst thing that can happen, where a parent is trying to poison the child to the other parent, because the damage to the child is huge. The child doesn't have the experience and emotional maturity to begin to deal with these things. The child takes one side or another, or the child just ends up a confused wreck. That's the terrible thing about family law.
I tend to research what it is that I'm going through or what it is I need to do. And one of the things that I read there is really, you know, if people had a time to do it again, they would put their kids first. Because not only is it better for the child, but it actually made decisions easier, and it made things clearer, because all you want to do when you're going through a divorce is to get that other person back, to hurt them more so than they hurt you. So by keeping Leia sort of the center of many of the decision making that I had to do, it made it easier. It made it easier for me to decide to let her go with her mom.
He never thought I was unfit to care for Leia, even with the affair right there in front of his face. So as soon as I told him I want to move to California, I have found a job there, he's even very supportive that Leia is going to come with me.
I just felt that I would have to give first. In other words, letting my daughter go It did make it easier for us to draw up a separation agreement that in time we both found fair. It saved us a lot of money without having to go and fight this through court was another, a big motivation. It's saying, look, we're going to get through this together, and this is how I'm going to prove to you that we are, by letting something go that means so much to me.
He talked to his mom and dad, to his 2 sisters, that the moment you talk something bad about Rina to Leia, you'll never see her. And I know for a fact it's true, because the way that, Leia treats me, and for Michael's parents, I still call them mom and dad, for them to talk to me, and, I'm sure they haven't forgotten, but I felt like they have forgiven me to some extent. We talk very civil, and it's funny, apps, we laugh more now than we did before. It was, yeah. That's what I was hoping for before.
I hope over time she can feel, as I mentioned earlier, that I've forgiven her because of how I've moved on in my life, and how I want to redefine our relationship now for Leia.
I know that Michael has forgiven me because he never had any ill wishes for me. He wants great things to happen to me. He's hoping that my relationship with Ken will work out. Because he said I put so much at stake out there for this one.
Absolutely. There's always going to be a special place in my heart for her, but it's a special place. It's not the same love that it was once before as a husband and wife, but it will always be, a level of care, and today I wish her well. I mean, I hope that it works out for the best for her, and partly because it'll affect Leia, our daughter, immensely.
I don't think I've ever done anything extra, anything great after the fact that allowed Michael to forgive me. I think it's just the way he is. He rendered forgiveness to me as a gift. Not only to me, but for himself. Forgiveness is really a gift to yourself, not to the offender. Self-forgiveness, I think, is the hardest to attain. I don't think I'm there 100% yet. I have to enjoy what's good right now and not dwell on the past. I'm talking to myself, really, not to the camera. The thing that bothers me the most, sometimes I talk about it like as if the affair happened yesterday. I have to snap out of that and promise as soon as the lights are off,